Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this one, we are going to continue our discussion about subnetting and subnet mask and Azure. So if you have not watched the video, you don't really have to, but I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I have created one virtual network. Now in Azure, even within one virtual network, you can have multiple address spaces, okay? So I have already created one class A address space, but with a /24 subnet mask, uh, and then one class B with 172.15.55.0 with again a /24 subnet mask. And now let's work with a 16 subnet mask. So what you notice over here, so the first two that I have created here, I have a total address count is 256 because only the last octet is available to me. So 24 means the network portion will take the first three octets, so that is 3 multiplied by 8, so 24. So I have only 8 bits left for my host, so that's 256. And in here, when I'm using /16 for our subnet mask, only the first two, so 255.255, so that first two octet is going to be used for the network. So the remaining 8 plus 8, so 16 of those bits are now available for hosts, and that really gives me 536. So 256. So really, another way to double check this one would be if you have a calculator and you know that one subnet is 256. So what you can do, 256 times 256, and that should give you 65,536, right? So that's another quick way to check. Or you can just do 2 to the power 16. That will give you the total number of this address count. So what we have also done in these two subnet masks, we have created subnets, okay? So in those subnets, but what we have done, we have just created a big subnet. So we have not divided those subnets. We just took the whole address space and created a big subnet. So in typically in Azure or in your own environment, you want to divide your subnet for various reasons, for security. You know, keep your management subnet separate from your other type of subnets, and maybe for wireless you're using one subnet. So there will be business reason for that. uh, so what we have done, we have also deployed a couple of virtual machines in here. So first, what we're gonna do in this particular lab, okay, so let's go back. So we're gonna use a /16, and first we're gonna figure out all of that stuff for our subnet mask address, subnet ID, first usable IP address, last usable IP address, and the broadcast address. So let's start with this. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So this is the address that we're working with. This time we have a /16. So I'm going to start over here. So that tells me that our subnet mask is going to be 255, but 0 and 0. Let me make that all delete. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to write down this address. So that's 10, 200, 300, and 33. Actually, you know what? 300 is not a good number. I don't know if you have noticed, because your address space, it can never be more than 255, right? So use 125. So if you are watching and thinking, "Oh my God, how stupid that person is," you're probably right. So let's fix that one. Come back over here and put it over here, and then go and do something like that. So 125 and then 33. Okay, that makes more sense, right? So what we want to do next, so this is a particular IP address in an address space, right? So we want to figure out the subnet ID. For the subnet ID, we know that here for 16, last 2 bit has to be 0, and we also know for the broadcast address, the last 2 octet has to be full, so 255, 255. And we know the network address does not change, so we'll just copy this and put them in here, and there we go. So It's pretty easy. So okay, no, I want to apply a different color, yellow and yellow. So in a typical network, you will have these two addresses that are not usable, right? Because this is for reserved for the subnet ID, and this one would be reserved for the broadcast address. So for the last usable address, so you put 255, and then here you 254, and over here first usable address is going to be 0 and 1. Okay, so you're starting with this, and then at the end, so you have a huge range that you can use uh, for your hosts. Typically what you would do, you will take this and then you will break into multiple smaller subnets. So let's now go and add this to Azure and see what happens. So let's come back over here. Let's add a subnet and let's call it. Actually, first we have to add the address space. So let's put it in here. So again, so if you try to put something like this dot 33, this is not an address space. This is one particular IP address. So you have to assign our subnet subnet ID, which is 10.200.0.0/16, and now it's telling me okay, here 10.200.0.0 to last usable address is 10.200.255.255, that many addresses. So I'm first going to save this one. So that's going to add the address space, but you still cannot use this address space until you have a subnet in there. So let's go ahead and add a subnet. So here for this I don't have any subnet, so let's just do a big subnet 16. The reason I'm calling it big subnet because I'm not doing smaller subnets. All I'm gonna do, put all of this, and like all of the address space I'm just gonna put it in here. Okay, I'm not dividing. It says 24. I'm just gonna use all of it. Okay, so all of it I'm gonna go. So again over here, it's Azure is gonna say I have 65,531 addresses that I can place in that particular. So in reality, you probably won't do that. You will divide this into multiple smaller subnets. But for this tutorial, I'm just gonna keep it is as a one really big subnet, and I'm just say save. So again, note that five of the addresses, and here they're saying how many available IP addresses, a lot of them, right, in this particular subnet. So last thing I wanted to do is just create a quick resource, and I'll just deploy one machine. So subnet big subnet big subnet 16, and let's see, resource group, I'm gonna use our existing resource group, and sorry about the background noise. And over here I'm gonna create a username, and then username, and I'm gonna go to disk, is not what I'm interested in. So here I'm gonna do 16 is the subnet that I'm gonna use for this deployment. In management, I don't need to do anything, not into anything, not anything. So it's now it's uh, the virtual machine, the deployment is started. Is the validation successful? Let's hit create. So it's going to deploy this particular virtual machine, and it usually takes less than a minute. So we're gonna take a look at and see what is the first IP address that we can use for our virtual machines. So again, in a typical on-prem environment, your first IP address in your subnet and the last one, they're reserved. They're the network ID and the broadcast ID. But in Azure, another three IP addresses are also reserved for Azure's own purpose. So you will be able to see the .4 address is the first one. So the deployment is done. So let's just go. And as I told you, So your first usable IP address, because Azure it assigns the IP address sequentially. It's just telling you what is the first usable IP address. So that would be 10.200.04. So if we go back, so in on-prem, so you have first usable IP address is 10.200.01, but in Azure it should be 10.200.0.4. Okay, so keep that in mind, and hopefully you will be able to design and understand how to get to your subnet id, how to get to your broadcast address, and then how to create the subnet. I'll do more videos on how to create a smaller subnet so that I don't have a 65,000 IPs in one subnet. That's just not practical. uh, so we'll show that typically your address space would be /16, and you would create your subnet maybe /24, or even smaller if you like. But that's for the next lesson. If you enjoy the video and learn something, please give me a like. If you feel like there's another way to explain this concept better, please leave a comment. I would appreciate that. With that, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Thank you.